We're talking about Epstein again. We're talking about pardons again. We're talking about Donald Trump and the things he's doing per usual. So Liz Oyer is here. I think I did one of the early interviews with Liz after she was unceremoniously fired from her job as the former DOJ pardon attorney. This was last March after she failed to reinstate Mel Gibson's gun rights. He lost his rights to own a gun due to a domestic violence conviction, and Liz determined that he should not be allowed to carry guns again. He shouldn't be pardoned for that, I guess is the right way to say it. Before that, Liz was a federal public defender. She represented clients in a wide range of federal criminal proceedings. Liz, great to see you again.
Thanks so much for having me back, Katie.
No, you've been doing such a good job informing people. By the way, it is hot as Hades in this studio for some reason, so I'm taking off this wool blazer, which felt great outside, but I'm starting to schwitz now. But anyway, Liz, let's talk about the latest in the world of pardons. Earlier this week, Ed Martin, who is Trump's pardon attorney, took your old job. He announced that 77 people were pardoned by President Trump, including allies like Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, John Eastman, Kenneth Chesborough. How do you say his name?
I'm
Chesborough?
actually not sure. Yeah, I'm not
Okay.
sure either.
And Mark Meadows, all blasts from the past. What was your reaction when you heard about these pardons? Were you surprised? Probably not at this point, right?
Katie, I've honestly felt sick to my stomach. I mean, that's how I feel every time I see a new piece of news break about pardons these days. I really believed when I was at the Justice Department that there was a path forward for clemency work, even under Donald Trump, that there was good that could be done with the clemency power. I no longer believe that. I mean, Donald Trump has abused the clemency power to a degree that he has thoroughly and completely discredited and corrupted it. And each new pardon seems to be worse than the last in some way or in multiple ways. This one really struck me for a number of reasons. One is it's incredibly broad. So it lists 77 people who are pardoned, but it actually has some language in it that says that anybody, even if their name is not listed, who was involved in trying to overturn the results of our Democratic election in 2020 is pardoned. So that is very broad, it's very sweeping, and that probably actually applies to Ed Martin. Ed Martin, who literally sits in my old chair, the pardon attorney under Donald Trump, is somebody who made a name for himself by leading the Stop the Steal movement. So he was advocating on behalf of these election deniers, and he was deeply involved in the strategy to try to overturn our Democratic election results. And he, it seems like, wrote a pardon for himself that Donald Trump signed along with other people. So that's crazy. Another thing that's crazy about it is that these crimes that these folks have been charged with related to election interference, they're crimes under state laws. They're charged in states around the country with interfering with those states' election procedures, and they have been charged with violating state laws. The one recognized limit on the president's pardon power in the Constitution is that it only applies to federal crimes, to offenses against the United States is the language the Constitution uses, and it means federal crimes, not state crimes. So Donald Trump is really testing the limits of the pardon power by trying to pardon a new category of crimes that aren't even within the scope of his constitutional power.
And Liz, is this the first time that he has done this for state crimes? Or, I mean, he's pardoned so many people. Have none of these other folks fallen under this category?
That's right. Yep. The pardons that have been issued to date, I mean, there are many that are really egregious for a lot of reasons, but they all do involve federal crimes, not state crimes. If you look at the website for the Office of the Pardon Attorney, which Ed Martin now leads, you can go to the frequently asked questions on the website. It says, can the president pardon a crime under state law? And the answer is no. The Constitution says, no, you cannot do this.
Okay, so if that's the case, Liz, I mean, I always think there ought to be a law, but what is the appeal process? Is there anything that can be done, or does the DOJ and you're the guy who replaced you, Ed Martin, do they have the final say? Can anything be done to revisit these decisions or these pardons?
Well, I think ultimately the validity of these pardons will be challenged in court. These individuals who are being prosecuted are going to take their pardon paperwork to court and they're going to say, Donald Trump pardoned me. And those courts in those states presiding over those cases will say, well, the Constitution says Donald Trump can't do this. And then there will be litigation in the court about whether Trump can or cannot do this. There's no legitimate basis for the courts to conclude that Trump actually can pardon state crimes. But winning that legal argument may really not be the point here. I think the point that Donald Trump is trying to make, well, there are two. One is that he believes that he's the king. So, he can do
Right, he
whatever he
can do
wants. He
whatever he
doesn't
wants.
Yeah, he doesn't feel bound by that little document called the Constitution that was written 250 years ago. He feels like he can just do whatever he wants, and if the Constitution stands in his way, he can ignore it. But the bigger purpose here is to send a message to his supporters that he has their back. If you commit a crime in the name of Donald Trump, Trump has your back. He can bail you out with a pardon. And that's the really scary and dangerous part of this. We have another election cycle coming up in a year, and those elections are going to be incredibly contested and important for the future of our country. And Trump is sending a message right now to his supporters. If you interfere with the elections on my behalf, don't worry, I've got you. I can pardon you. And that is a powerful message to send, and frankly, a dangerous message to send given all of the political violence that we're seeing in our country, and the fact that he's also consistent with this pardoned people who've committed political violence on January 6th. So if you take all the pardons together, he's really using them in a very systematic way to destroy democratic safeguards in our country, including free and fair elections.
I want to talk to you about each individual or name a few of them. But before I do, it strikes me that Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State of Georgia, who I interviewed after the election in 2020, was a real profile in courage.
Yeah.
Donald Trump called him. He recorded the conversation asking for 11,740 votes. I can't remember the exact number, and Ravensburger basically told him to pound sand, that he
Yep.
wasn't going to do that. And you think about how few people have stood up to him. And now, so I wonder what Brad Ravensburger is thinking about all these pardons. And I wondered if we could talk about a few of these people. Rudy Giuliani, who helped lead an effort to pressure state legislatures to reject Biden's victories in key swing states, right? That's
Yep.
one. And of course, we all know the former mayor of New York City. I'm not quite sure, folks, what happened to him. I interviewed him after a 9/11. He was an incredible mayor at the time, a unifying figure, and he really went off the deep end. I think
Yeah.
that's safe to say. Tell us about John Eastman, what you know about this guy. This was a name, of course, we heard a lot a few years back.
Yeah, he's another lawyer, another a legal commentator who did a video recently about this issue. Described it as the boots and the suits. So January 6th was when Trump pardoned the boots on the ground at the Capitol, who were trying to overturn the election certification process, and now he's pardoning the suits, the people in suits, the lawyers who used legal process to try to undermine the results of our democratic election. And John Eastman was one of those people. Rudy Giuliani is another one of those people who have serious jobs and are trying to use their knowledge and training for ill, essentially, to undermine democratic safeguards.
What were they facing had they not been pardoned? Had they been already, I should know this, everyone. Sorry, I'm trying to keep up with this stuff. Have they been convicted already, or is Giuliani was charged but not convicted? Was he convicted? I don't even remember. Does anybody here remember? Anyway, Liz, help
Yeah.
us.
So this is actually a very complicated area because there are cases that have been brought in different states, and these cases are in different procedural postures. Some of them have been dismissed with instructions that prosecutors need to refile charges for various legal reasons. Some of them are still pending. There are none of these cases that have actually come to fruition or resulted in convictions of most of these 77 people. And in fact, many of the 77 people listed have not even been charged with a crime.
So it
So
was like an
some
anticipatory pardon in a way.
yeah, so some folks are saying these are preemptive pardons, meaning pardons that are intended to apply in advance, like you said, to prevent these people from being charged down the road later. And that may be the actual legal significance of the pardons is probably not the most significant aspect of them. What's really significant is the message that Donald Trump is sending on two different levels. One, that he just does not respect the rule of law or the Constitution, and two, that he will go to great lengths to bail out those people who commit crimes in the name of Donald Trump.
And we should mention just a couple of the other big names. Mark Meadows, of course, he was the White House chief of staff in 2020, a crucial go between Donald Trump and state officials. Sidney Powell, I'm sure we remember Sidney Powell. She was a former Trump attorney who spread conspiracy theories about ballot fraud after he lost the 2020 election. She launched a fringe legal assault on election results in key swing states. So these were some of the really big players in the whole
Yeah.
Stop the Steal movement, weren't they?
Yep, that's exactly right. And these are people that Ed Martin, the pardon attorney, associates himself with. I mean, he's one of them. And it appears that behind the scenes, he was really pushing for this relief to be granted. And as I mentioned, it likely applies to him as well. He has tweeted a couple of times in during his tenure as pardon attorney, "No MAGA left behind." That is his motto when it comes to pardons, is that pardons should be used to bail out MAGA supporters who put themselves on the line in the name of Donald Trump. It's a theme that we've seen throughout the use of pardons starting on day one of this new Trump administration with the January 6th pardons, and it has continued with some really inappropriate and reprehensible pardons of other MAGA supporters. There's a sheriff in Virginia, an elected sheriff named Scott Jenkins, who was pardoned after he was convicted by a jury of selling badges for cash. He essentially had a cash for badges scam that he was running. He was selling the official instruments of his office to people who could pay for a sheriff's badge because they wanted to use it to get out of trouble that they got into personally. He was sentenced by a judge to 10 years in prison because that judge found that he abused his official office. And Donald Trump gave him a pardon, apparently because he was a big, vocal, outspoken MAGA supporter. Even Republican elected officials in that region of Virginia have said that they think that pardon was ill advised and inappropriate. But, no MAGA left behind is the motto. And there's another one that really jumps out. This woman, Michelle Fiore, who was an elected official in Nevada, who was raising money for a police memorial. So to build a memorial to a police officer who died in the line of duty. And she embezzled the money that she was raising. She stole it and she spent it on plastic surgery. And this woman got a full pardon from Donald Trump without serving a day in prison for that crime. Her restitution, her obligation to pay back the money she stole for the plastic surgery, that was wiped out by this pardon. And the only explanation is that she was a vocal, outspoken booster of the president and MAGA causes. So this is really a theme that has run through Donald Trump's use of the pardon power with the egging on of his pardon attorney, Ed Martin, during his second term.
It seems insane because, obviously Donald Trump got a lot of support from police departments everywhere.
Yeah.
And the idea that she took all this money and used it to pay for plastic surgery, you would think that if he truly was a supporter of the police, as he professes to be, that this would anger him. But I guess his own vanity makes him think, well, she loved me, so I'm going to take care of her, right?
Exactly. That seems to be all it takes. All it takes to get a pardon from Donald Trump nowadays is kiss the ring or write a big check.
Oh, someone, that's not me, but it must, Julia, is that you? That's Julia. Can Liz explain how pardons are typically used? I think that's I was actually going to ask Liz, good question, Julia, about how bizarre and unusual this is, because I still, And I sometimes get confused about the Justice Department because I know it's supposed to be independent, but let's face it, Liz, there have been administrations where the Justice Department has kind of reflected, I think, the views of the president at the time. Having said that, talk about how different this is and how perverted the pardon process, that's very alliterative, how perverted the pardon process has become.
Yeah, Katie, that's a great question because the pardon power is something that is not well understood by the American public. It's a pretty obscure little piece of the Constitution, but it's actually a tremendous amount of power that the president has to grant pardons. The pardon power has always been something that the president has discretion to do whatever he wants with, but the Justice Department has played historically a key role in advising the president about how to use the pardon power to make sure that it's not politicized or corrupted. The way that the Justice Department has done that is they've created an independent office within the DOJ that is not led by political officials. It's led by a career official, historically has been, called the pardon attorney. And that was my job under the beginning of the Trump administration and throughout most of the Biden administration. I was a career appointee, so not appointed by the president, a career official expected to stay on throughout any presidency, regardless of party, et cetera, and advise the president about how to use the pardon power. Now, Donald Trump has obviously fired me, installed Ed Martin, somebody who's a very political, like total political operative, not a serious attorney, as the pardon attorney. So there are no checks anymore, no institutional checks on the use of the pardon power. And this has a couple of results. One, it's resulting in all of these really terrible, inappropriate pardons that Donald Trump is issuing. Two, it means that ordinary people who may actually be deserving of the type of relief that a pardon can provide are being ignored. There are probably about 20,000 applications from regular people who don't have political connections or don't have MAGA ties that are piled up at the office of the pardon attorney that are just being ignored right now in favor of the applications of folks who can either spend $1 million to have dinner with the president at Mar-a-Lago or make a big donation to Trump's political causes or buy his cryptocurrency. Those are the people who are getting pardons now, and regular people who go through the ordinary, long-standing process with the Justice Department are just being ignored. It's really very, very unfair to those regular Americans.
Well, it seems to me there have been controversial pardons in the past, right? I mean, a
Yeah.
handful. Thank you so much. Like I remember Bill Clinton, right? Mark Rich was pardoned.
Yep.
There are a lot of people, and then they kind of do it on their way out, right?
Mhm.
Instead of kind of in the middle of their term. But this is a whole different ball of wax, is it not? And
It is. It is.
talk
Yeah.
about some of those questionable pardons, because this isn't the first time it has happened. This is just the number of them, and the rationale for the pardon, which is highly unusual and really unprecedented, right?
Yeah, what has really changed is the rationale as well as the amount of money that's going into it. We're hearing about people who are literally spending millions of dollars to get pardons, and that's a new phenomenon under Donald Trump. It's not supposed to have anything to do with your resources. It's supposed to be about merit. There's actually a lengthy, detailed manual that the Justice Department has in place that lays out what are the criteria to be considered for a pardon. And most of the people Donald Trump has pardoned do not meet any of the established criteria. What has happened in the past is most presidents have used most of their pardons in a way that has been legitimate, but the few that have really been questionable have kind of overshadowed the whole thing, including Bill Clinton's pardon of Mark Rich, who was a major donor who had fled the country and was pardoned when he was essentially on the run from the law. So that was not a good look at all, and that
Right.
raised a lot of legitimate questions. But there was bipartisan outrage over that at the time. There was a congressional investigation that followed that pardon, and people on both sides were really upset about it. We're not seeing that type of outrage right now over Donald Trump's pardons, which I really just don't understand. Um, And I think what's also being lost is the ways in which pardons have been used for good. President Obama, for example, used the pardon power mostly to reduce the prison sentences of nonviolent drug offenders who had been over sentenced under outdated mandatory minimum laws. And
Right.
I have been lucky enough to get to know some of the people who've benefited from those reductions in sentence. And they include people who were serving life for crimes that they committed, sometimes at the age of 18, that didn't actually physically harm anyone. I mean, low-level drug offenses, and these are people who are now back in the community doing extraordinary things who, if not for the grace of President Obama, would die in prison. So the good that pardons can do is being lost in this conversation about Donald Trump's completely corrupt pardons. And unfortunately, there were some bad ones under President Biden, too, that I think have people on the right saying, well, Donald Trump is justified to do this because Biden did some bad pardons. And you know what? That's not the right way to look at it. I agree with the folks that are critical of some of Biden's pardons, but I don't think that they were on the same order of magnitude in any way, shape, or form as the ones that Trump is doing right now as part of sort of a pay for play pardon operation.
Some of them are too just kind of head scratchers, like George Santos, right? Like,
Yeah,
I mean, what was the point of pardoning him and reality TV stars Julie and Todd Chrisley, not to mention obviously the roughly 1,500 January 6 rioters. And it didn't really matter how serious their crimes were, whether they were there or if they were actually shattering the windows of the Capitol and assaulting police officers. There was
right.
no just there was no kind of difference. They were just it was just a blanket pardon for every one of them, and their
Yeah.
specific crimes weren't really even evaluated, were they?
That's exactly right. One thing that's not being done is vetting. Normally, like when I was the pardon attorney, we did extensive vetting of individuals who were being considered for pardons. And you actually had to undergo a full FBI background investigation to get a pardon, something along the lines of what you'd have to go through to get a top secret security clearance. That's how it normally works. But Donald Trump has thrown all of that out the window, and he is granting pardons based on recommendations from people in his circle, many of whom are profiting tremendously off of their ability to get these pardons for their clients. So there are lawyers and lobbyists in Trump's orbit who are making millions upon millions of dollars trying to get people pardons. And that's really what it's all about. It's created this sort of cottage industry, a pardon economy that is quite corrupt and really
Like
benefiting a lot of people in Trump's inner circle.
pardons are us, right? It's
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great word for it.
tell me about this guy, the Binance founder, who pled guilty to violating anti-money laundering and sanction laws. His pardon, get this, came 2 months after the Wall Street Journal reported that the Trump family had made billions of dollars in a partnership with this executive's company. So, I mean, clearly that's kind of a quid pro quo happening there. But that I know from your post that really incensed you as well.
Yeah, I mean, that was a staggeringly large quid pro quo. This guy who goes by the nickname CZ is a cryptocurrency billionaire. He is one of the top 25 richest people on earth, and he was able to broker a billion with a B, a $2 billion investment into Trump's family cryptocurrency company right at the beginning when it was getting launched. He is responsible for the financial success of that company, and that was enough to get him a pardon. His crimes involved violating U.S. anti-money laundering laws that are intended to protect our national security. He was allowing his trading platform to be used by terrorists and criminals of all sorts to launder money, to send money overseas to organizations like Al Qaeda, Hamas. I mean, really bad ones. And that was all wiped out. His conviction was wiped out because he made this huge investment in Trump's cryptocurrency company and he got a full pardon.
Well, will he have his day in court, or is that just a done deal?
It's a done deal. He's been pardoned. It's not reversible. He is now in Trump's good graces. He's doing business with Trump's company. I mean, it's really just shockingly corrupt. And the Trump family, Trump and his sons in particular, as well as the Witkoff family, who are Trump's partners in this business, are making tremendous amounts of money. I mean, hand over fist, hundreds of millions of dollars this year alone on this company, thanks in large part to this guy, CZ, who they've now pardoned as a reward for helping the company.
And I don't think Trump or his family have been pressed enough by journalists about
Agreed.
these huge conflicts of interest that are happening and how they're, I interviewed a guy from the New Yorker. What did he say, you guys, that Trump had made 4.3, was it 4.3?
Let me check.
Well, we'll check it. But I mean, just to your point, Liz, and the family making millions
Yep.
and millions of dollars. I want to ask you real quick before we're going to talk to Adam Kinzinger next about this crazy Epstein shit that's going down. Pardon my French, everyone. But I wanted to ask you about the jobs at the Justice Department, Liz, because the Washington Post reported that the DOJ has lost thousands
Yeah.
of experienced attorneys, including you, since the start of the administration, and has only backfilled a fraction of the open
Mhm.
jobs. The advocacy group Justice Connection estimates that around 5,500 people, not all of them attorneys, have quit the department, been fired, or taken a buyout from the Trump administration. So, I mean, how difficult is it for the Justice Department to operate, to do the business, our business,
Yeah.
uh, without without being properly staffed, without having the attorneys and the other staffers they need to do their jobs?
It's created a very dangerous situation, Katie. Even if they could fill those jobs overnight with people right out of law school, what they've lost in terms of experience, expertise, knowledge, skills is not something that can be easily replaced. And it's very dangerous because the mission of the Justice Department is to protect public safety, national security, uphold our civil rights. And it's not in a position to do that effectively if it doesn't have experienced, knowledgeable staff. It used to be that working in the Justice Department was considered an incredibly prestigious job, but people don't even want those jobs right now because the Justice Department's lawyers are being put in untenable positions every day, having to decide whether to abide by their oath to uphold the Constitution or follow the directions of their bosses, Todd Blanche and Pam Bondi. And people are leaving because they just can't find a way to navigate those untenable positions they're being put in by the leadership.
I'm curious if you still talk to, Liz, some of your colleagues from the DOJ and what they're telling you about the environment there and the atmosphere within the department and what it's like. Can you share that with us?
My old office, Katie, has been absolutely decimated. I talked recently with a lawyer who had recently departed the office. The legal staff is down to maybe about 5 attorneys from about 25 when I left. It really has been absolutely decimated. And everyone I know who's still in the Justice Department is looking for an exit, but the job market is very difficult because so many lawyers are coming out of government looking for new jobs. They've just decided that they cannot continue to work in that environment. And so it's a really, really challenging time. And it's a really demoralizing time for those who have tried to stay on and do the right thing and be part of the solution.
What a big fat mess, Liz. But thank you for all your work. I think you have become such an important voice in helping people understand what's going on. It's so hard to keep track of everything that's going on
It is.
in the news right now. And I think I speak on behalf of a lot of people. We really appreciate your calm and understandable explanation of what's going on and the people who are being pardoned and the consequences of those pardons. So thank you so much, Liz.
Thank you so much, Katie. I appreciate your digging into this issue. And I've done an explainer series on my Instagram about pardons. So if folks want to understand better how the pardon power works or is supposed to work, they can check out those videos on my
Yeah.
Instagram. It's a lot
I highly
clear.
recommend everybody follow Liz because, as I said, her work has been invaluable. Liz, thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Appreciate it.
Katie.
Talk
Good to
to you
see you.
soon. Bye. Okay, now we are going to talk to my friend Adam Kinzinger. Boy, you guys, I can't even keep up with what's going on in this with this Epstein news. Uh, there has been a shitload of developments. I just like saying that because I could never say it on television, with the Epstein case. And Adam Kinzinger is a former congressman. I'm sure you all probably know who he is. He's become one of the few Republicans willing to speak out against the Trump administration, probably because he's no longer in Congress. He's written a new piece for a Substack entitled "You Can't Protect Children While Defending a Predator," in reaction to the latest developments in the ongoing Epstein case. Adam's going to join us momentarily. Where are you, Adam? Anyway, you guys, tell me what you want to talk about. Put your comments or your questions in the comment section. Uh, we're just waiting for Adam. Um, anyway, and then after we talk to Adam, I'm going to be talking to Abby Phillip about her book. I don't know
Her
if she's
first book.
her first book about Reverend Jesse Jackson. And I'm going to get her take on the government shutdown and whether or not the feeling is the Democrats capitulated, those 8 senators, or if they did the right thing to bring the government back.
Resend it.
Okay, we're asking him again.
I know he's ready because I'm texting with his team.
Okay. Anyway, how can I even begin to tell you guys what's happened with the Epstein case? Should I start? uh, I mean, basically, gosh, where do I start? The warden of the prison where Ghislaine Maxwell has been uh, held, and then she was moved to a more comfortable prison. Was she moved to a different prison or just a different prison, right? Uh, oh, there you are, Adam.
Hey,
Hey, how are you?
I'm great. What about you?
I thought you were ghosting me.
No, never, never.
Anyway, my God, Adam, you have to help us understand all the developing news in this Epstein stuff. First of all, I know you wrote in your piece, there is no safe corner in this fight. If you care about the ability of our democracy to self correct, if you care about children who were hidden, abused, silenced, then you must refuse the political convenience of, he hates them, so I'll back him anyway. He hates them so because in the end, the only victims who get buried by partisan convenience are the children, and the only side worth standing on is the side of the vulnerable. Do you feel like there will still be those who still use the he hates them, so I'll back him anyway? Who's them?
I
Who
think
wrote
that
this? Anyway, you explain, Adam.
well, listen, my biggest thing is maybe we redo the verbiage, but here's the deal. So 30 years of programming people to hate liberals, right? So you think about Fox News, you think about um, Rush Limbaugh, all that kind of stuff. They have ingrained this hate of the left so much that now if you have somebody that is hating the people you hate, you're connected to him. Why is it that Donald Trump really doesn't stand for anything, but people are so loyal? It's because of that. They see him as hating the people they hate. And right now, with the Epstein stuff, I mean, there is nobody with a straight face that can know what's going on and hear about this stuff and say, well, it's nothing there. I think Donald Trump just called it a hoax again, despite running on it. And why do people love it? Because Donald Trump is taken off the left, and that's what it comes down to. And they are having a really hard time fighting through this right now.
Yeah, and I mean, in so many different ways. Let's talk about sort of some of the developments, which I was attempting to do before you joined us. So, Adam, basically, Ghislaine Maxwell was moved to a more comfortable prison, right?
Mhm.
And then there was all this information that the warden was giving her special treatment. She was getting special dinners. I don't have this in my questions right here, but all these different things that people were doing to make her life easier. They were letting her visitors come and be in a different section, providing them with snacks and all this other stuff. Basically giving her kind of the royal treatment. She could make phone calls. She was giving the warden correspondence to And then I mean, it was just so weird. So, I guess there was a whistleblower in the prison, right? And Jamie Raskin
Mhm.
got involved, and now he's calling for hearings. Just unpack that for us for a moment.
Yeah, so, basically, and I don't know what specifically triggered it besides, there was all of a sudden this pressure to release the files and that kind of they said, "No, we're not gonna do it," and that sparked the whole fury, and then, Todd Blanche, who was Donald Trump's personal lawyer and now is deputy whatever at the DOJ, went and interviewed Ghislaine Maxwell and said claims I think they put out some version of a transcript and claims he was just going there because he wants to know more about what's going on in the Epstein case. Anyway, after he speaks with her, she gets sent to this really nice prison. I mean, really nice. I doubt you and I would want to go, but if you have to go to prison, it'd be a place to go. She's getting, in essence, concierge service, and there's only one reason, and there's all this rumor that and then this is what one of the whistleblowers had said is she's fully expecting a commutation, so to have her sentence ended. Now, the question is why? I mean, let's think about who Ghislaine Maxwell is. She isn't just, like the executive assistant to Epstein. She didn't just like make the meetings happen and coordinate everything. She herself was involved sometimes in the
She
abuse.
participated.
Correct.
She was engaged in these sexual acts with girls, with young
Correct.
girls.
Yep. She is a child rapist. Let's call it
Yeah.
what it is. And and now for some reason Donald Trump has been on this I need to pardon her. And I think let's just we could go through the arguments either way, but let's just be clear about what this is. I'm sure that she is aware, whether that she was directly told it or whether it was a wink and a nod, that if you hold back and you don't say anything, Donald Trump probably at the end of his term will pardon you or commute your sentence. Period. I
Right. I
mean,
just talked to Liz Oyer about that.
yeah, yeah. And so why would Donald Trump do that? Let's keep in mind, he wants to throw everybody and their mother in prison. Okay. Everybody he doesn't like, he wants to throw in prison. But he wants to commute the people that have, or pardon the people that have been helpful to him or could be helpful to him. He just pardoned a guy he claimed he didn't know, by the way, who was a cryptocurrency dude that's in cahoots with the Trump kids. The Trumps have made $2 billion on cryptocurrency in 10 months. And then he's asked, why'd you pardon this guy? Oh, I don't know who he is. But then he goes after Biden because he claims Biden was not a mental state to pardon people because he didn't know what he was doing. So, yeah, I mean, the corruption on this, Katie, is just beyond deep, but beyond the corruption now, you literally have the president of the United States protecting a child rapist, let's call it what it is, and refusing to release files that he promised to release.
Let's talk about what the Democrats did today. They disclosed emails from a trove suggesting President Trump knew far more about Epstein's sex trafficking than he previously acknowledged. They had subpoenaed these from the Epstein estate, I guess, back in August, and they're just releasing them now. Can you explain why they're doing that and what these emails contained?
Yeah, I mean, these emails, why they're doing it, I think, is because the Republicans are not having a legitimate hearing on it. They're, have pivoted. Here's again the thing I just can't understand. There are good people in the Republicans. I mean, I don't, politically, I don't like any of them anymore, but they're good-hearted people like Don Bacon, right? Some of those, Fitzpatrick. Why aren't they signing this? The discharge petition, which I can get into, but so the bottom line is the emails they released today basically was Epstein, I think, with Ghislaine Maxwell at one point talking about, Donald Trump has stayed quiet. And, and then there was a discussion between Epstein and Michael Wolff, where they're basically discussing the fact that they could, so this is in 2015, if Donald Trump wins, then we could potentially talk to him or give him what to say. He hasn't been asked about it. Bottom line is very clearly, and Epstein said in one of them that Donald Trump spent hours at his estate with a girl unnamed, an underage girl. Like, look, you take that, just that, right? Alone, that's enough to be really concerned. Secondly, you take the fact that he wrote Donald Trump a letter, okay, with the outline of a woman and kind of a weird poem or screenplay. And now, when I say, if you've seen the actual real one, the outline of a woman, not really. It almost looks like the outline of a girl, a little girl. And then that's where he says, our dirty little secrets are, we have our little secrets between us. I mean, come on. The truth is staring everybody in the face.
Then, okay, so you've got that, right? That becomes public. And then the Republicans release emails too. So the Republicans released 23,000 pages of documents after months of delay. And this was after the Democrats. So what did the Republicans do and why?
They're trying to bury this, right? So what they're trying to do is say, oh, this is one email out of, a gajillion emails. This doesn't mean anything. Well, sure. I mean, it may be one email out of a gajillion emails, but, if I'm committing a crime, I'm not, I may send an email or two about committing a crime. I'm not going to send 23,000. So the fact that you release 23,000 innocuous emails or whatever doesn't mean that the one you just saw, what they were talking about, doesn't exist. So this is what Republicans have become very good at. And, you as somebody that's been in the media a while understand this is throwing so much information at you over and over. And then right when you start to get your sea legs under you and talk about an issue, bam, you get hit with a left hook and there's something else to talk about and then a right hook. And that's what's happening. And in this confusion, in this craziness, people feel very confused. They don't know what to believe. And so you just revert to trusting who you trust. Well, who is it that MAGA trusts? Donald Trump.
Well, let's talk about sort of with the government shutdown ending, and I'd love to talk to you about that in a moment. But now, the congresswoman from Arizona is finally going to be sworn in by Mike Johnson. Adelita Grijalva, is that how you pronounce?
Yeah, something like that.
Grijalva from Arizona, and she was actually just sworn in a few minutes ago.
Okay.
So I guess that she provides the deciding vote, right? That will allow the House Oversight Committee to have access to the Epstein files. Is that right?
Well, not sort of. What she will be is the final vote or the final signature on a discharge petition. So this is a very rarely done thing. I think they might have had one recently because the House is very different than it ever has been in history. I led one of the first ones to happen in 25 years. It was something about export import bank, just a little. But anyway, it's very rare because to sign a discharge petition when you're in the majority is seen as like being a traitor. Okay. Because you're going against your leadership. And so obviously the minority party will sign discharge petitions, but they never get to 218. What is a discharge petition? When you get to 218 signatures, it forces this process in place that eventually this thing comes to the floor for a vote. So they will have an up and down vote. Now, I don't know if that up and down vote is specific to the House, like, now the Oversight Committee has X, Y, and Z, or if it's just a demand to release it. I should know that, but I don't. But bottom line is the White House is panicking. I mean, Donald Trump is personally calling Lauren Boebert and Nancy Mace. Why? Why? Why does he care? Well, I think we know.
Yeah, and they're two people who crossed the aisle
Yeah.
and signed the discharge petition, right?
Yep, they have. And Nancy Mace is running for governor of South Carolina. She's had a lot of interesting issues lately. Um, so there's pressure on her. Lauren Boebert, evidently, and the White House admitted this today, she was called by President Trump to get off the discharge petition. And look, why did they not swear Grijalva in when the government was shut down? We know why. Because they didn't want her to sign the discharge petition. They bought 7 more weeks. And during that 7 weeks, they were working the phones to try to get some of these Republicans off the discharge petition. Now, ultimately, I don't know the rules if they have 218 now, if anybody can withdraw their name or not. I don't know if that changes it. But the bottom line is they worked hard for this. And why are you working so hard against something that you shouldn't have to fear? And if you do have to fear it, then ultimately, Mike Johnson, you're defending a guy involved in whatever way, right? I'm not making a specific, but in whatever way, with a known child sex trafficker. So quit, Republicans, watching your DVD documentaries about sex trafficking and getting angry when you're protecting one. And look, I mean, what it would be unfair. Well, no, it wouldn't be unfair. It would be different, though, except that the Republicans and Donald Trump, for the longest time, accused all Democrats of being pedophiles. That was
Right.
their fallback line. So guess what? Here we are.
Well, you think about Pizzagate, right? And that there's just this sex sort of part of MAGA that is
Yeah.
really, really obsessed and kind of fixated and under the impression that everyone's a pedophile, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, I mean, look, if there is pedophilia, let's take it on. That's part of the reason I want the Epstein files released. But no, I mean, bottom line is they used that because they thought they could pin it on Democrats. When it boomerangs back, they all of a sudden go silent.
Now, I know that Republicans today on the House Oversight Committee said on X that the victim that the email exchange referred to in the Democratic tranche of I guess emails or whatever was Virginia Roberts Giuffre, and she was 16 when she was recruited at Mar-a-Lago by Ghislaine Maxwell when she was a spa attendant there. So that seems to be unclear, but that's kind of a convenient thing to say, isn't it? Because Virginia Giuffre in her book said Donald Trump did nothing wrong, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's convenient. Is that really her name or not? I don't know. I'm sure Democrats know the name, so you would probably hear differently. But that's the thing we got to keep in mind, too, is like there are real victims here and like real people that are victims. Let's also think about, let's say Donald Trump, and I'm not accusing him of doing anything with her, but certainly he knew, right? Certainly, if you're spending any time with a girl under 18, that's kind of weird. And so that's what's like, regardless. I'm not making accusations that Donald Trump engaged in XYZ. We don't know, but we know that he was very close to somebody that we know did that. And for Republicans to defend it, I don't know how they can look at themselves in the mirror, but I also didn't know how they could look at themselves in the mirror after January 6th.
I mean, that's true. And what about the pressure that they're putting on right now on Marjorie Taylor Greene and Nancy Mace and Lauren Boebert? As you said, they're kind of freaking out. Trump is calling them repeatedly, which clearly feels like methinks he doth protest too much, right?
Yeah,
Something
yeah.
that is really terrifying for him for this stuff to become public. So, can you imagine the pressure that they're feeling right now? And do you think that they will respond to that pressure by, if they can, taking back their vote?
I hope not. I mean, each of them kind of have staked a lot on signing this discharge petition. Can I say something though, really quick, which is, guys, Marjorie Taylor Greene has not found Jesus. She's not changed. She's playing a game, right? Either she is becoming who she really was and she lied about it, or she's putting on a front. Either way, let's support her in this, though. And yeah, I mean, the pressure is intense. The pressure is things like, you know, we're not going to fundraise for you. We're not going to put your bills on the floor. And trust me, as a guy that did this, when you turn against MAGA, um, it costs, it hurts. But in this case, I think MAGA, the base is sitting around. There are probably some that are hardcore, super hardcore Trump that are like, we'll defend him. But I think there's a lot of people sitting around going, this is weird. Something's going on here. And that's why Donald Trump is so scared of it.
What about Democrats that might be implicated with all these, files? I mean, there's some pretty high ranking Democrats
Yeah.
who are rumored to have befriended and spent time with Epstein. I mean, can you talk about that and just sort of the impact not only on Donald Trump and whether Republicans are going to continue to stand by their man, but also just on a lot of other seemingly distinguished people. You and I aren't going to name names, but we've heard them being floated. And I mean, this could be really devastating for so many people.
Yeah, it could be. And look, let's say this, if Donald Trump was not in the Epstein files, which, by the way, he had the FBI count how many times he was named, right? So that was a whistleblower that said that. Um, but if Donald Trump wasn't in it, do you guys think he would be hesitant to release these files if it was just Democrats? Of course not. He would do it in a
Yeah.
second. But yeah, I think if this comes out, and they do have to make sure that, if it's like, John Johnson had dinner with him once, well, that doesn't make John Johnson a trafficker. But, if John Johnson went to the island, and I'm making up that name, by the way, if he went to the island and was involved and there's evidence of it, yeah. And you know what, Katie, and I think you agree with me. I don't care if somebody's on the right or left. If you were involved knowingly in a child sex trafficking ring, we need to know about that. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
some Democrats may come down on this too.
And by the way, Ghislaine Maxwell has asked for her sentence to be commuted. Is that a rumor or is
Yes.
that just, huh? It's being reported, but we don't know for sure. But if somehow she is pardoned and released, don't you think a lot of people are going to go apeshit at him?
Yeah, I do. I do. And I hope so. And I hope it's more Republicans than we're hearing from now. Look, he's been talking about pardoning P. Diddy. He just pardoned again a cryptocurrency guy that his kids are in business with, pretends like he doesn't know him. Um, yeah, I think if he does, people are going to go crazy. But this is Donald Trump who he can pardon, have a 3 days of really bad press, and then create some other thing that distracts us.
That's
Right.
true.
And in the
But
process, if he pardons Ghislaine or commutes her sentence, then she's not going to squeal. And she's the one who's alive, who knows everything that can squeal on him.
yeah,
And
on the
so,
other hand, if these files are released, they don't really need Ghislaine to say what happened because I think it will be. But could these files be heavily redacted too? I mean,
yeah, they could be. And, a lot of stuff has already been released that's heavily redacted. I mean, like literally pages that are all black. Um, and that's why, yeah, I think they've gone through these files enough to know what they need to redact to protect legitimately innocent people. Everything else we need to know. And look, I'm not just coming out of thin air with this, and others aren't either. Donald Trump is the one who said when he was running that we need to do this. All these Republican leaders were saying we need to release the Epstein files. Okay, I'm in. I'm in. And by the way, Katie, they're all going to say, well, why weren't Democrats calling to release the Epstein files before Trump was in? And here's the right answer, the true answer. Because everybody assumed the DOJ was doing its job, and the DOJ was doing its job. But Donald Trump ran on the fact that he was going to release it, that this is a cover up. Now he gets in and now he's pulling back. Of course, we want to see what's in it. Of course, because it's really suspicious.
hey, before we go, Adam, can you just give us your take on the 8 Democrats who decided to negotiate with Republicans and John Thune and others to open the government back up? Do you think this is going to ultimately? I mean, what do you think the fallout will be? Of course, progressives are super angry. They feel like these Democrats capitulated. I interviewed Angus King, and he's like, "Listen, there was no end game for people like Bernie Sanders. The Republicans were not going to negotiate about health care and the ACA. So this is the only way we can negotiate." I mean, who's the winner? Who's the loser? And what kind of impact do you think it's going to have on the political scene, but on the Democratic Party in particular?
Look, I think ultimately the losers are Republicans, and I think the Democrats won. Now, I think they could have won more, right? And I think the pain, and I hate to talk about this because these are real lives and it's a real impact, but the pain was increasing exponentially and it was falling entirely on Republicans. I mean, the polls were saying that too. Now, is it likely they could have held out to get this done? I think the goal was kind of pie in the sky to get it done. I thought it was the right goal, but ultimately there could have been bigger moves like getting rid of the filibuster, which is helpful to Democrats in the long run. So I wish they'd have stuck with it a little longer, but I'll also say this. I think Democrats should and can be upset at these eight, but I think ultimately celebrate the fact that the Democrats won the messaging on this. Now everybody that sees their healthcare premiums going up knows who is responsible, and they've taken back that ground. So, yes, could they have held out longer and should they have? I think so. But in the same token, you made some gains. And don't fall into the trap that Republicans fell into, which ultimately led to Donald Trump, which is this idea that we can never compromise on anything. And if we move if we move the, 3 yards instead of 10 yards where we wanted to go, 3 yards is still good. Because now next time you only have 7 to go. And so be upset at the leaders, but then ultimately, I think to my Democratic friends, take a deep breath and recognize the victories that you did make. And they were significant.
And you don't think the messaging will change now that this has happened and the Democrats were the ones to reach out to the Republicans? You still think that they'll be seen as the better party in this whole
Yeah,
scenario?
I still think so. I think the people that are angry are the base of the Democrats. And, again, I think rightfully so. But yeah, I think the Democrats look responsible. They're the ones that are fighting for the common man. And that's a message you got to keep coming out with. You're losing union voters, Democrats. That is insane to me. Reach out to union voters, talk about what people are listening to, and or talking about cost of living and ultimately corruption. This is the most corrupt administration in American history.
Do you think you might run for president?
uh, if you ask me today, it's probably not, but I'm not ruling it out. And I won't run as a Republican. I'm not, you know, I that party has sailed away. I'm not going to say no, because I want to be honest. So I'll look at probably over the next year and see where we're at. I think I could represent a significant amount of people that I think the Democrats need to bring into the tent, and that's kind of centrist, blue collar union voters, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, we'll stay tuned and we'll be
Yeah,
following your decision. And Adam, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for doing this.
anytime, anytime. Let me know. Take care.
Great to see you.
You
Bye.
too.
Take
Bye
care.
bye.
Bye. Okay. And our final guest for today is Abby Phillip from CNN. She is obviously the anchor at CNN at 10 o'clock. I've gotten to know her a bit. She's wonderful and really, really smart. And she's also written a book, which we're going to talk about. But gosh, we have so much to talk about. I'm sure she's going to have a very lively table tonight on her show. Yikes. Honestly, my head feels like it's going to explode. But we're going to talk to her about obviously this whole Epstein news, the decision to reopen the government, and the 8 Democratic senators that made that happen. And we'll talk a little bit about what the strikes in the Pacific and against these so-called drug votes and coming from Venezuela, and the fact that the UK has, what did the UK do exactly? They stopped.
Sharing certain intelligence.
Yes, the UK is yeah, Abby's got the whole scoop. Honestly, Abby, I do not know how you keep up with all this stuff.
Oh man, it's like a fire hose. It
Isn't
really
it?
is.
Anyway,
Uh,
thank you for doing this, Abby. It's great to see you. Gosh,
You
I'm sure
too.
first of all, I'm sure you've been following the Epstein news. I mean, talk about whiplash with, the Democrats releasing emails, the Republicans releasing emails. Tell us what you think it all means, and what people in Washington are saying about this crazy news.
Yeah, I mean, I think now we know why the White House is fighting this and has been. I mean, I think any rational White House or staff would try to prevent this kind of reputational damage from their principal, and so they're doing it with Trump. And so these emails, indicate that there was a close relationship between Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein.
But
We
we
knew
knew
that.
that, right,
We
Abby?
knew that. We knew that. But I think one of the things, that's not to say that this is not significant, because I really do think that it is. But one of the things about this particular revelation is that there is a specific mention of Donald Trump and one of the victims. And that is the thing that the White House has been trying to sort of prevent from ever really being in the conversation. And now it's in the conversation. And I do think it's a legitimate question to ask: what was the nature of the relationship? What did Donald Trump know about this at the time? And these emails obviously predate Trump running for president, Trump even talking about running for president. So the idea that this is some kind of planted political thing doesn't really hold water in this context. So it's very significant, and I think at this point, all it does is it's going to force this issue even further onto the front burner for the White House. They don't even want to be in a position where they have to veto a discharge position to release the Epstein files, because that means that the president is vetoing something that would force him to release the Epstein files. And I think they don't want to have to do that.
So the Democrats release all these emails, and then the Republicans do do the same thing. And talk about what was motivating the Republicans to do what they did. 23,000 pages of documents in response to the House Democrats doing this. Uh,
Yeah.
what did they contain, which tried to counter what the House Democrats had released?
Well, the Republicans are basically saying there's more context here. There's more to understand about all these documents that the Democrats have selectively released information, and they have. I mean, Democrats did, in fact, selectively release information that was damaging to Trump. But I also think that the information that's contained within all of these documents are going to incriminate a lot of people. Larry Summers, the former uh,
President of Harvard
Harvard president, which as
and
I know,
Secretary
knew
of
him,
Treasury.
and Treasury Secretary. The president of Harvard part is the part that is most relevant to me, I guess. But Larry Summers is in these messages detailing, another close relationship with Epstein. So all along, I think the strategy on the Republican side has been to say that Donald Trump's relationship with Epstein is not unusual. There are all these other men who had similar relationships. Some of them are Democrats, and all of these things can be true at the same time. That I think people can also ask, what more do we need to know about Trump's relationship with Epstein, and also particularly these victims?
Yeah, what do you think about the fact that Trump is, like, panicked and trying to get Lauren Boebert and, Nancy Mace to I guess would be rescind their vote, right, Abby, to
Yeah.
push these forward because finally the Arizona congresswoman has been sworn in and she was gonna provide the final vote, and that's why people were saying Mike Johnson didn't wanna swear her in, until he absolutely had to. So talk about kind of the dynamics that are going on there.
Yeah, and Adelita Grijalva, just as she was sworn in like the last hour or so, she reiterated that uh, use her vote to release the Epstein files. And Lauren Boebert also comes out of this meeting with the White House saying, "I haven't really changed my mind on this." I do
And that
think
meanwhile, Nancy Mace is apparently unreachable or something.
shocker. She's had a rough go of it these last couple of weeks. So, look, I think Nancy Mace is a bit of a wild card in this, because she has been fashioning herself as a crusader for victims of
Right.
abuse and things of this nature. And I think she wants to make a statement that she is fighting for these women. I think similarly, Lauren Boebert has kind of picked up this mantle and said she wants to release these files. I think the White House is fighting an uphill battle here. The very fact that this meeting occurred is kind of a red flag. I mean, it's a red flag about how concerned they are. Now, again, I don't think Congress even passing this petition to release the Epstein files necessarily is going to mean that everything is going to be out.
Well, that's the
The
thing.
White House
Yeah,
still has a lot of control.
I was going to say, how heavily redacted do you think the files are going to be, and how much do you think they will really tell us?
Well, even before we get to that point, Katie, I don't even know that the files will even be released because they passed this discharge petition. All the president has to do is veto it. And there's unlikely to be a veto-proof majority to get this through. So it's kind of hard to see that this actually results in new files being revealed that the White House doesn't want to be revealed. And even if they are, they would be heavily redacted, not just for victims' names, but also for the men who are allegedly involved for those names as well. They can choose essentially what they want to release. And so I do, but that being said, it that's not the reason. I mean, they are still concerned, even though there are other roadblocks to these files being released. And that's because it it looks bad for President Trump to have to step in and say, I will not release these files. Remember, the narrative from the Trump administration and the Department of Justice has been that they can't release them in order to protect the victims. So if they then block them in order to protect Trump, it really undermines that argument. And remember, this is an argument that is most salient to Donald Trump's base that has been, pushing for this for years. And so I think it creates a political problem that they don't want to have.
But I thought the victims actually were supportive of having these released. I mean, they've come out publicly, they've held press conferences, they've done interviews. So
They
isn't that
are.
a specious argument by the DOJ that somehow they're protecting the victims?
Absolutely. And I think that the victims have said very clearly they want more information released, not less. And on top of that, I mean, there are ways to protect the identities of these victims while also releasing the files. Now, that being said, Katie, I do think there are a lot of other legitimate arguments for not just wholesale releasing the files, including that the people who are named in the files are not accused of a crime. And when you release information that paints people in a negative light and they don't have the opportunity to contested, I think there are definitely some ethical concerns around that are legitimate. But I will note that the White House and the Department of Justice, they're not making those arguments. And it very much seems that a lot of this is geared toward protecting Trump's reputation, even though he, like everybody else mentioned in these files, hasn't been accused of any crimes. There's no, hard evidence of wrongdoing. I think there's the risk of reputational damage that they think is incredibly high, and they're willing to do quite a lot to prevent that from happening.
Abby, let's talk about the weird Michael Wolff of all of this, right?
Mm.
So, Michael Wolff, can you explain to folks watching who he is and how he gave Epstein a heads up and basically said, what did he say? Hold on, I have this somewhere. Oh, Michael Wolff in 2016 wrote to Epstein, there's an opportunity to come forward this week and talk about Trump in such a way that could garner you great sympathy and help finish him. Interested?
That is very interesting because Michael Wolff has written um, at least one, but multiple books about Trump, books that actually Trump figures over the years have participated in to varying degrees. And he's obviously not well liked in Trump world, but I think that there was a sense that if you don't talk to him, the book's going to get written anyway. So they did. And the comments from Epstein to Michael Wolff are basically about Trump being crazy, essentially.
Right.
Um, yeah. And so, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think that this is the part where I think it is more I think the Trump folks would have more of an argument to make that there's a motive here to damage Trump specifically in these conversations with Michael Wolff. But I don't think that's the case with the interactions, the emails between Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein that preceded that by quite a lot of time.
Another Michael Wolff quote: I think you should let him hang himself. If he says he hasn't been on the plane or to the house, then that gives you valuable PR and political currency. You can hang him in a way that potentially generates a positive benefit for you. Or if it really looks like he could win, you could save him generating a debt. Of course, it is possible that when asked, he'll say Jeffrey is a great guy and has gotten a raw deal and is a victim of political correctness, which is to be outlawed in a Trump regime. It's very bizarre that Michael Wolff is
Yeah.
giving Jeffrey Epstein advice on how to quote unquote bury Donald Trump or how to use him for his benefit.
Totally. And even that idea of a debt, I think, to be frank, Katie, that goes to the heart of some of the theories about the Epstein scheme, which was there that a lot of the scheme was about powerful people being involved in this and their involvement being used as blackmail against them. And so Michael Wolff is actually kind of alluding to that pretty directly. And again, he considers himself to be a journalist, although I think that this would obviously call that into question significantly. But that is speaking right to the heart of what many people believe to be the influence scheme that was behind Epstein, all these powerful people being involved in him, and the use of secrecy, the island, the plane, etc., in order to entrap people in reputational debt, if you will, that they owed to Epstein, and he used it against them. So lots of questions here. Yeah.
Yeah, there are a number of times, Abby, I'm sure you've read this, when Epstein cast judgment on Trump in the emails. Does that mean Epstein's lawyer, you guys, Kathy Rumler? I don't, we don't know, but that's all right. Counsel
Yeah.
Kathy Rumler wrote that Trump was, quote, so gross. And Epstein replied, he is worse in real life and up close. Another time,
Yeah.
Epstein writes that he knows how dirty Donald is, given the evidence of their connection. Um, Ha ha I mean, how is the administration gonna get away with concealing these files? It's just gonna
Mm.
I guess maybe they think it looks really bad if they're released and really bad if they're not, but less bad if they're not.
Less bad if they're not, for sure. I mean, I think the strategy of this White House on a number of fronts, not just this, but a lot of things, is that they go all the way to protect Trump, even if the thing that they're protecting him from may or may not be that bad. And I'm not saying that this is not that bad. I'm just saying that I've seen them use this playbook when it comes to things that are where Trump actually really hasn't done anything wrong, but where they try to protect him at all costs, which actually raises people's sort of spidey sense that what is he hiding something? So that's kind of their MO. But in this case, I do think that Trump specifically, um, I think he knows that this is problematic. I think he is personally very concerned about what this would say about this type of information says about him. And I think he's willing to do quite a lot to prevent it from being out at this point, including, I mean, as everybody knows, I mean, the extraordinary nature of sending the deputy attorney general to go interview Ghislaine Maxwell from prison, essentially, and then the fact that she was then moved to a lower security prison as a result of that interview, seemingly. Uh, I think that we gloss over how extraordinary that was, but that is an extraordinary step that is taken by an administration to try to get ahead of a story that they think is incredibly damaging to the
Well,
president.
now you have this new development where there's a whistleblower within the prison saying the prison warden was giving Ghislaine Maxwell all kinds of really grossly inappropriate preferential treatment. I'm just going to read a couple of these things because I mentioned them in an earlier interview, but Ms. Maxwell's meals have been customized and prepared by federal prison camp staff and then personally delivered to her in her cell by longtime federal employees. When Ms. Maxwell wanted to arrange a private meeting with visitors, including members of her family, the warden personally arranged it for her and then provided a special cordoned off area for visitors to arrive, as well as an assortment of snacks and refreshments for her guests. Ms. Maxwell's guests were permitted to bring computers, an unprecedented action by the warden, given the security risk and potential for Ms. Maxwell to use a computer to conduct unmonitored communications with the outside world. When the phone lines went down for other inmates at the camp, Ms. Maxwell provided specific instructions about exactly which Bureau of Prison personnel her contacts should call and how those BOP personnel would then connect to relay the call to Miss Maxwell. When she wanted to review and edit documents quickly, she essentially used Warden Hall as her personal secretary and administrative assistant. Miss Maxwell's correspondence would email documents directly to the warden, who would provide them to Miss Maxwell, who would then review and edit them and provide them back to the warden to scan and provide to the. I mean, it's insane. For other inmates, simple mail can take weeks to arrive and is frequently lost. And finally, here's two more. An inmate who trains puppies to become service dogs was instructed to provide one to Maxwell for a time so she could play with the puppy, even though neither inmates nor staff are ordinarily allowed to pet the service dogs in training. And finally, when Ms. Maxwell wanted to go to the prison exercise area, she was personally escorted there after hours by prison guards so she could work out by herself and was allowed to enjoy recreation time in staff-only areas. I mean, this is frigging crazy, right? I mean, so clearly they had gotten orders from, this deputy DO,
The deputy attorney general.
thank you, the deputy
Yeah.
attorney general, and were kind of bending over backwards to accommodate her. There's a whistleblower. He sends all this to Jamie Raskin. Now there's going to be hearings on that. Something tells me this
Yeah.
prison warden is going to get canned pretty soon.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, who knows? Because there was once a thing as whistleblower protections, but those are definitely being eroded in this administration. But yeah, I mean, I think these allegations are obviously very serious. But the other day we had on one of Ghislaine Maxwell's other attorneys, who's actually a regular on our show, Arthur Idala, and he didn't speak specifically to this, but I asked him. I was like, did she get moved because she gave them what they wanted, which was information that was not incriminating to Trump. And he was like, all I can say is, you wouldn't even sit down for an interview like that unless you knew that you were going to get something on the other side of it. So the benefit to her has been so clear. And the Bureau of Prisons rules for her being moved from the prison that she was in to the one that she's in now actually prohibit people with her offenses from being moved there. So there are a lot of violations happening, but no one to really stop them. And, I'm actually surprised, Katie, that Democrats in the minority even have been able to get as much as they have been able to get out of this issue in terms of the hearings and the files that they've been able to have revealed, because the administration has a lot of control over this situation, but they've lost a lot of control around the edges with these files, which are just a small fraction of what exists. And this whistleblower, and I'm sure that there will be others who've come forward saying that something doesn't smell right here.
I want to get to the government shutdown or the end of the government shutdown and also your book, Abby. But before we do, a lot of people in the comments are talking about Michael Wolff, right? Who's
Yeah.
kind of not having a very good day, let's say. But
Yes.
I think, can you help people understand sort of Michael Wolff, as somebody helpfully wrote in the comments? Thank you, everyone, for helping with this. Basically, I think has raised something like $700,000 in a GoFundMe campaign because he's being sued by Melania Trump for writing that Melania met Donald Trump through through Jeffrey Epstein, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's my understanding. And look, I think here's the thing. Here's the problem is that when you have an email showing that Michael Wolff is sort of collaborating with Epstein on narratives designed to damage Donald Trump, it's going to call into question everything that he says from here on out. And I understand that probably people have a lot of reasons to question the things that he's said and written. But now, at this point, I think that puts him in a lot of hot water because I think it suggests that, y- if he's writing salacious things about Donald Trump and Melania Trump, what is the motive here? And is the motive the truth, or is the motive a narrative that, um, I don't know, that he thinks damages Trump or protects Epstein in some way, or whatever it is. So it's a problem. It's a real problem.
Hey, so quick question. I'm sure you discussed this on at your table last night, but the Democrats, it seems like this has created a fissure once again within the Democratic Party with the 8 senators who wanted to reopen the government, with other progressives saying you capitulated, you caved. Where do you see this kind of all shaking out, Abby?
Well, I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's more or less over, but you know, uh, more or less over. But the shouting. I mean, I think people, um, they will vote to reopen the government at some point. I think that the anger on the left is pre-existing. It predated this shutdown. They were mad at Chuck Schumer and frankly at Hakeem Jeffries even before all of this, thinking that they were not adequate spokespeople for the party. So this is just giving the base even more to hold on to. I I do think that there's an element of the shutdown that had to end this way. A small group of lawmakers. This is how they all end. A small group of lawmakers, they meet in private, they cook up a deal. The deal involves getting something um, in the future, a little bit of compromise on the right, a little bit of compromise on the left, and then they reopen the government. So it was always going to end like this to some extent, unless Democrats could hold it together, which is Chuck Schumer's job to hold his caucus together. And I think that there is probably legitimate anger uh, in the party that he wasn't able to do that. But at the end of the day, I think that what happens in Congress doesn't matter. But that anger that is on in the base is probably going to be the fuel for the midterms. It's what's going to help them to organize themselves going into this next midterm cycle, which is actually kind of what they need. So there is actually an argument to be made um, that they lost this shutdown fight, but that they figured out an organizing principle that gets them into the next cycle. And that plus the off-year election results that we had this past Tuesday helps give Democrats a little bit more momentum than they had previously. But yeah, I mean, are they in love with Chuck Schumer? No. But have I heard any actual sitting senators say that he must go? No. And I think that's partly because there's a sense that right at this moment, it doesn't really matter. That's a battle that can be fought in January of 2027 if they have this
It'll
Senate
be
majority.
interesting what happens with healthcare and the Affordable Care Act, and
Yeah.
if this is going to put a lot of pressure on Republicans now to figure out to come work something out with the Democrats and to extend these benefits.
Well, this is the hard part. I mean, they have to I mean, Republicans have failed to come up with a plan to replace Obamacare for 15 years. And what I mean, it's broken. If it's broken, as they say, what are they going to do to fix it? And I think that's been the hard part for them.
And now they're gonna be forced, I think, to reckon with that. Let me talk. I know you don't have a ton of time, and I wanna talk to you about your book about Jesse Jackson, and I know you've been on a book tour, Abby. It's called, Dream Deferred: Jesse Jackson and the Fight for Black Political Power. It's about his legacy, how he reshaped the Democratic Party, and in many ways paved the way for the election of Barack Obama. I'm so interested in how you came to or how you decided to write a book about Jesse Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, the book is about what Jesse Jackson's political chapter was and what it meant, what its significance was, and also what its relevance is today. Because I think that there's a lot about what he ran on and how he ran that I think is actually being emulated right now in particularly in Democratic politicians, but not even just in Democratic politicians. I think that we are in this populist political moment that really echoes what Jesse Jackson's campaigns were about. And the populism is on both the right and on the left. And there is a sort of open question in the book, which is about whether or not the Democratic Party in particular, which he ran inside the Democratic Party, but whether the Democratic Party in particular can learn lessons from his campaigns. When we see figures like Bernie Sanders and AOC, they are candidates who are kind of running in a Jesse Jackson mold of politics. In fact, Bernie Sanders told me for this book that his campaigns of 2016 and 2020 picked up where Jesse Jackson left off. And so what remains to be done is there really a candidate who can actually run on a unifying populist message that also appeals to this sort of diverse Democratic Party that currently exists, that,
Now,
by the way, Jesse Jackson helped create?
not only can they run though, Abby, can they win? I mean,
Can they
that's the
win?
big
Yeah,
that's the big question because Jesse Jackson, obviously was not successful.
yeah,
Bernie Sanders ultimately was not successful. Who knows how the Democratic Party is changing? But this seems to be the age-old argument.
yes.
Should the Democratic Party veer more to the left, or should it be more centrist and attract more independent voters? And do you see that changing now with the election of Zohran Mamdani, for example? I think Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill were
Yeah.
certainly more moderate candidates, right? And more moderate Democrats. So, where do you see the Democratic Party going, especially understanding kind of the arc of history and Jesse Jackson's role in it?
Yeah. I mean, I think that to your point, it is the age-old question, right? There's always been this tension between the center and the left, the center and the right. But what I think one thing to consider is that this is actually kind of a populist moment that we're in as a country. I think you see not just the Bernie Sanders and the AOCs, but also the Donald Trumps running as this sort of you know, I think some Democrats would disagree that he's actually a populist, but he's running as a sort of a right-wing populist politician. And a lot of that politics is about the working class and who can speak to them most effectively. And I do think that that is becoming one of the biggest issues in our politics today because of the rise of income inequality, because of the feeling that working class and middle class people feel like they're not getting ahead, they're just getting by. That is only accelerating in this country, and it's forcing politicians to address that. That's why the conversation today is about affordability, because that's what Americans want to hear about. And you can have an affordability message that is centrist. You could have an affordability message that is right wing or left wing, but you got to have an affordability message. And I do think that there's one other element of it, and that is like um, this anti-establishment idea that these candidates like Jesse Jackson and like Trump started running against the parties that they were running inside of.
Right.
And I think that speaks to an anger that exists in our population, that people have with establishment figures and systems that they don't think are working for them. And I do think that politicians, I don't care where you are on the sort of ideological spectrum, they have to address that because that's also real. It's also growing. And politicians left and right are speaking to it in different ways. And so those are the elements that I think just looking at it from a left, right, center kind of frame sort of misses the broader message that actually kind of it just ignores those sort of pure ideological frameworks.
Yeah.
Because what people are hearing is, I'm fighting for you, and the powers that be aren't working for the rich and the powerful and not working for you. And you can have that message whether you're on the right or on the left or in the center.
Well, to your point, Abby, I think it has been amplified by income inequality. Bernie Sanders wrote that book, and he said, 1% of the country holds more wealth than 93% of the country. So income inequality has only gotten worse. And I remember when Haley Barbour, after Trump won the first time, I interviewed him and he said, like, he gave a big middle finger to the establishment. And now I think everybody wants to give a big middle finger to the establishment and to the status quo. Someone said
Yeah.
Andrew Cuomo had it going against him because his name is it's like the status Cuomo.
I mean, look, I think that there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, I think that there is this pushback against and this is a risk for Democrats that there's a risk that Democrats come across as just defending the system as it is, when a lot of Americans are saying, we don't even like the system. We don't think it's working that well. And so understanding that discontent is what helped Zohran Mamdani break through. But it's also something that taking that out of an ideological frame can be super important because you don't necessarily need to be a democratic socialist in order to understand that a lot of Americans are frustrated with the way that things are and they want the country to work better for them specifically.
But not
And
unlike
so,
Trump, but
yeah,
Abby, not unlike Trump, I think with Zoran, it was also a bit about the cult of personality because
yeah,
he is so charismatic. He is
yeah,
such a really talented and gifted communicator, and he has this emotional connection with the audience and with his supporters. I mean, the same could be said for better or for worse with Donald Trump and his supporters. There's something very visceral about the
yeah,
way that he communicated. So I think it was sort of a combination of things, but I don't think we
yes.
can leave out his skill at that.
Yeah. And I think that's also where Jesse Jackson comes in is that, in writing this book, part of what I wanted to recreate was what we forget about Jesse Jackson, who's now 84 years old. And, he had several decades after these campaigns of doing a bunch of stuff. But in that moment, in the 80s, he was the ultimate celebrity candidate. He was young, he was charismatic, he was interesting, he was a great speaker. He had this sort of moving way of communicating. And I think you're really hitting on it exactly right, which is that there's this alchemy of a successful politician. And part of the alchemy is not just message, it's also messenger. It's also how that person is able to connect and communicate. And I think that when you look at some of these politicians in all these different ideological places in our system, they kind of all have that in common, where they're able to get, 15,000 people in an arena and bring them to their feet. And there is something very unique about that, those figures in our history kind of stand out
Yeah,
in the
because
sort
I
of
think they're few and far
timeline of people.
I was
Yeah,
gonna
they
say, I
are.
think they're pretty few and far between when
They
you think
really are.
about it. You think about soaring oratory and this ability to make you feel something. And I think that's what people respond to and are looking for. I know you have to go. I know you're getting over a bad cold. I hope you're feeling better, by the way.
Yes, I am. I
You probably
am.
run
Thank
your you
you.
you probably
I
run
sound a little bit congested, but
you
forgive me, but
I think you've
I'm
been
on the
running
mend.
yourself ragged. I just wanna mention your book again. It's called A Dream Deferred, Jesse Jackson and the Fight for Black Political Power. And I think there are a lot of lessons, a lot of insights in this book that help us understand what's happening in the world of politics today. And, you're gonna have fun at your table tonight.
There's a lot to talk about. I didn't really have Epstein on my bingo card today, but here we are. We'll be talking about it.
Here we are
Um,
again. Well, I'll be
yeah.
watching, and thank you again, Abby, for doing this. It's great to be with you.
Thank you, Katie. Great to see you.
Okay, see you soon, I hope.
See you.
Okay. Now, everyone, this I think we're gonna I wanna mention we have a really good, interesting podcast that is dropping tomorrow with John Fetterman. John Fetterman, wrote a book also called Unfettered. I was gonna say fetterless, but unfettered. I'm tired, everybody. This is a lot to keep in my brain. I'll also be interviewing tomorrow in our studio. I'm very excited about this. Congresswoman Sarah McBride. I got to know her when I did a documentary a few years back called Gender Revolution, our changing notion of gender identity in this country and what was causing it and the impact it was having. And boy, we have a lot to catch up on because things have changed so much.